We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our open source YouTube channel from Aqua Security. Or if you're new to our channel, welcome to our open source channel. My name is Anais. I'm the open source developer advocate here at Aqua. And basically, the open source team, including me, is running this channel. So you will find different tutorials, live streams of our technologies, but also live streams from our contributors. And we just started this live stream particularly last week. We had Jose from the open source team joining us and talking about his contributor experience and how he got started in open source. And now we have Shubham, who's joining us on this live stream to talk about how he started contributing to Aqua Security, specifically to Trivy, how he got started before that in open source, and his experience to contributing to Aqua. And I'm very curious about what kind of feedback he's able to share, and maybe there's something else that's coming up. If you have any questions at all, anything you want to comment, anything interesting that we share in this live stream, please comment them either in the live chat if you're watching live, or if you're joining the recording. If you have any questions, comments, please comment them down below in the comment section in that case, and we will sure address it in the next live stream. Now let's bring Shubham onto the live stream. Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Hi, Anas. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We just talked about how hot it is today in the UK. Now I'm not made for warm weather, right? Yeah, it's really great to have you here. I'm so glad that you reached out on my Twitter to bring you on to the live stream. It's really great to have you here. Can you just maybe introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What do you do on a day-to-day basis as a person? Just tell the people here who is Shubham.
Okay. So, hi everyone. I am Shubham. I am right now a final year undergrad at VIT India. I'm pursuing my bachelor's in technology and computer science, and I'm specialization in information security. And
Amazing.
that is roughly about what I'm doing right now. And coming to how I'm doing day to day, it's pretty much I would say attending one class a day. That is because I've done all my credits, so that's all I have in terms of academics. Apart from that, I was spending my time learning and exploring new tech, and along with that, making sure I reach up to my commitments for my Google Summer of Code and the Google Season of Documentation that I'm doing right now. So that
you
is
do lots
how
of
my day
different
goes.
things. Amazing.
Yeah, and apart from that, I also play FIFA whenever I can get a like a 5 or 10 minute break. So yeah.
Great. So I saw on your GitHub that you started contributing to open source projects or to projects on your GitHub about 3 years ago. Is that correct? Like about that time?
Yeah.
How did that come about? Like, what made you start to think of like, oh, I should get started contributing to open source? Because I remember when I did my first undergraduate degree, and I broke that off after like 2 years. But when I did my first undergraduate degree in information technology, similar to computer science, I wasn't thinking at all about contributing to open source. So I just want to understand, like, what made you get started?
Okay. So I think I remember it was during my second year when I had a doubt. So I was building a Django app, right? And I had a doubt, and I asked the that, hey, you know what? How do I do this? He said, just push it to GitHub. I'll check. I'm like, what? Push it to what? What are you talking about? And then he said, you know what? Go Google out and see what GitHub is. That is when I was to open. Hey, okay, you know what? This entire world exists, and I had my fair share of struggles in the first 2 months understanding Git and GitHub and what's the difference. So that is where I initially pushed my code and understood how GitHub works and what is this open source world. It was I think pretty much after 4 or 5 months after the initial push that I understood, okay, there are projects which I can contribute to, or which I can read the code base of, understand stuff. So it was thanks to this like, so we have this chapter IEEE VIT. So and he helped me out there. He's like, hey, you know what, you should know GitHub. It's gonna definitely help you down the line. So that's
Totally.
where, like, open source and GitHub came into my life. Yeah.
When you got started with Git and using GitHub, and how did you first learn it? Were you asking different people questions? Like, for example, your friend, were you reaching out to them? Or did you watch tutorials at the time? Like, I get a lot of questions. How should people get started to learn about it? And let's start with Git. How would you suggest people to get started with that? Because ultimately, it translates to all other technologies, right? Like how you get started and learn one technology, that's how you will engage with other technologies, right?
Okay. So first things first, right? To any new newcomers watching this right now, you might not realize the power of Git right now. And like after a few years, you'll be like, okay, Git is the crux, right? You do anything, you should have a version control system. So you can roll back
Yep.
stuff, you can collaborate. So
Yeah.
when I was doing it, right, and I am not a person of a lot of textual stuff. I would see 100 words, I would get intimidated. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's open YouTube. What is Git? What is the difference between Git and GitHub? And the three basic commands, that is adding, committing, pushing. I got used to it, and then after a week or a later, I started to read about what are issues, what are pull requests, what are branches. So I took these gradual steps, because Git in itself is very, I would say, intimidating for a beginner, because when you are at initial stages, right, like how I was, there is already a lot of tech which is intimidating you. Like there's a
Yep.
lot of buzzwords going around in the campus,
Totally.
and Git is something that adds its own complexity. That is where
Yeah.
I spent my initial time. Okay, you know what, I spent 1 week just on these three basic, adding, committing, pushing, and then after a week I learned about what is branching, what is force pushing, which you should not know, but yeah. So yeah.
I think this is great that you got first started with like the principles of how do you engage with that software in the first place, right? How do you kind of engage on GitHub, right, with different repositories and just interact with the system. And then from there, how did you find the first open source project that you wanted to contribute to, right? Like what was the step there, and how did you identify which project you wanted to contribute to, and how did you find out how you can contribute to, right? Like a lot of projects have good for starter issues. Was that something that helped you, or how did you make this initial step before we start talking about Trivy and Aqua specifically? Yeah. But this first time that you did that, do you remember like how you made this jump?
Yeah, so I remember pretty well, right? After 2 or 3 months of a lot of pushing of my personal projects, right, and
yeah,
collaborating with my team on some like 4 or 5 team based projects.
mm-hmm.
I was going through a tool and it lacked something. I don't remember the exact name. And then I googled it up, and the first thing that came up was a GitHub page. I'm like, oh wow, it is open source. Let me go through it. I went through it and I realized, okay, you know what? This is a huge code base. Sounds intimidating. What do I do? I texted my senior that, hey, do I need to know the entire code base to get started? He's like, absolutely
Yep.
not. That is the most fundamentally scary part for every first timer, right? You do not need to know the entire code. You just need to know what function or what API call you want to change. So that is where I got comfortable that, okay, I do not need to know the exact thing. I just need to know what I lack and what that project needs. That little bit of help helps both me as well as the project as well. So I would say for those initial issues and PRs, there is no need to find like, oh, you know what, I'm going to bring a major change. That just helps you get more involved in the community, because one small issue makes you talk to, let's say, 2 or 3 maintainers. That leads you to finding out 3 or 4 more issues. That gradual build would like eventually end up at a great rapport with the project.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing point that you mentioned here, that it's really, lots of people get overwhelmed at the beginning when they look at open source projects and they're like, how would I understand all of this, right? And it's really about finding your level of abstraction of like, which information is actually important to me to make my first contribution, and everything else you can ignore at that point, right? I was smiling earlier because there's somebody whom you helped last year in the chat. I don't know how to pronounce your name, Varun. Maybe you know Shubham. But yeah, that's amazing that you also help other people to get onboarded to those technologies. Thank you so much for joining the chat and sharing that with us. This is great. So I'm very curious to hear about your experience now contributing to Trivy, to Aqua's open source projects. Trivy is the main one. For those who don't know, like this channel and Trivy and everything, just give me a really quick introduction. So this is the open source channel for Aqua. So we talk only about our open source technologies here. If you have any questions, just subscribe to our channel and you can comment as well in the comment section. Or if you have any questions afterwards watching the recording, then please comment them in the comment section as well down below. So at Aqua, at our open source Git repositories, our main project is Trivy, which is an open source security scanner. And I'm just curious, how did you first come across Trivy? Like, what was your very first interaction with Trivy? How did you find it?
Okay, So this rolls back to November 2021, where I was doing my
Yeah.
Linux Foundation mentorship with Kiverno.
Hmm.
So that is where, we had a task where, we want to scan our builds for every PR or for every coaching that is raised, because that, helps in the DevOps cycle for the project. So
Yep.
that is why, that is where I was looking to various projects, that offer these at a very simpler integration. That is where
Yep.
I found out Trivy, and I'm like, you know what, this is the perfect integration there. So I used the Trivy action which we have on GitHub for their GitHub action. It is still there. I know it's pretty helpful because I was pretty much amazed that hey, you know what, it just needs the directory, it does the rest of it. I was pretty
Yeah.
much amazed at that point of view, and I had a notepad where I had written that okay, I have to check out these open source repositories later.
Yeah.
So that is where I was introduced to Trivy, and then yeah, then after this, finally when I got some time, right, like in the past 1 month, and I think I came up with Trivy again. Yeah, I was reading about eBPFs, so that's why I came across Tracy. So then I'm like, oh, this is the same Aqua security that has Trivy. So then I
Yeah.
came back to Trivy, and I'm like, okay, Trivy helped me back then. Let me find a way where I can contribute back to it, so that the project can also
Yeah.
grow. Looking for a good first issue, and I found an issue which made sense because I am not that well versed with container orchestration or Kubernetes per se. I found a good first
Hmm.
issue, which just asked me to like do a minor change. I think we can talk about the PR later. So then, yeah, this happened, and then I opened my first PR. Yeah.
Amazing. So, just jumping straight into it, what was something that you didn't like about the experience of first time contributing to Trivy? Was there anything where you were like, this didn't make any sense, or I don't understand how to do X, or where I can get started, or how to talk to these people there, or anything that you like, any comments, anything that you would change, any feedback, any thoughts, any moment where you got stuck, anything related, you know what I mean? Like, I'm really
Yeah.
curious about these moments where just we cause frustration in contributors, because that's ultimately what we want to avoid, right? So it would be great to hear from you if there was any moment where you were like, this could be done better, you know? Yeah.
So there were two things. First is I never
Okay.
wrote Golang
Awesome.
beforehand,
Okay.
so I had to
Yeah.
understand Go. So for
Yeah.
me, that was fun, but equally frustrating. Okay, what does defer does? I spent 15 minutes understanding what the defer keyword does. That was not frustrating. I mean, it's a learning point, but again, from a beginner's point of view, they'd be like, okay, I don't even know Golang. Should I even start? So that
Yeah.
is right. Like you should not stop whatever the language is. At the end, it's just telling the technology what they have to just logic. So that is one thing. And apart from that, one thing that I seriously learned is so when I created my fork, right? The
Yeah.
CLI that we're using was UrviFs1. So it's a CLI library for Trivy. So
Yeah.
I created my fork, I added my features, I committed it, and I pushed it. I think I pushed it a week later, and I realized that Trivy has migrated completely to a different CLI library called Cobra.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
like,
using
okay.
Cobra. Lots of projects on the cloud native space use Cobra. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is great, this is better, but what do I do now? Then
Yeah.
I asked my friends, hey, is there a way I can migrate stuff? Is there a way I can do something? And then after I would say 4 to 5 hours of like debugging, understanding the differences, the architecture, I was finally able to force push a commit that exactly does what it was doing in Urva CLI. And yeah, that was a frustrating experience. But again,
Amazing.
that made me learn or understand that you should be in constant touch with the maintainers or with the open source contributors, because they can ping you up that
Yeah.
hey, what, this minor or major release or this minor change might come up, so be prepared or update your fork. So that is the
Yeah.
thing that I learned, right? Like be in touch with the maintainers or like with the community. Yeah.
Totally. You mentioned so many amazing points here. The first thing is that you didn't know Go before you contributed to Trivy. And yesterday I was doing a podcast recording where I was the guest, and I was talking about different contributor experience. And the host was sharing with me that there was this project that they contributed to a long time, several years ago. And basically the maintainers of the project, they would, whenever there would be an issue, they would ask the person who created the issue, okay, can you create a patch for it? Like, can you try to fix it, or can you try to implement what you want to implement? And then when the person would reply, but I don't know the language, I don't know this project, then the maintainer would say, well, just try anyway. We'll see what happens. You will just learn it, and that's a really interesting approach, because ultimately we can still fix it, later on, but there's a lot that you can gain out of the experience of diving into it, and then also getting the feedback from maintainers, right? Which is probably a very, very valuable experience when you're getting started, and just having that also additional input, right? So that's the first thing that you mentioned that I thought was really amazing. Would you generally recommend people to get started with a new technology by contributing? Or would you, like, just from your own personal perspective, or would you suggest people to rather learn a technology first and then see how they can contribute to open source? Like, what was this just a one-time incident, let's say, where you got started with a new technology by contributing to a project, or is it something that you regularly do?
I think it's about what you are more enthusiastic about, right? Some people are enthusiastic about projects, so they do their project-based learning. Some are enthusiastic about the tool that you're using and contributing back to it. So they are like, okay, we'll just refer to documentation and a few tutorials. Let me just dive deep into it. And some people like to build some mini projects, like starting with a hello world, then a basic CLI, and then probably an API, a library. So it depends on what excites you. That's it. Like, what clicks for you.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have a rule that you should start by a project. Like, that is what most people do, but at the end, what that personal excitement clicks, that is, one should go ahead with. So, for example, when I learned JavaScript, I did it, like in a very project-based structure. I made 4 or 5 projects, and I contributed to smaller scale repositories. I made a couple of collaborative projects, and then I contributed to bigger ones. But with Golang, right, I was pretty enthusiastic about Trivy. So I'm like, okay, this good first issue is there. I don't want to miss it. It looks doable, and I want to do it. So that is, I quickly jumped on the head that, hey, can I take this up? I really want to do it. So yeah.
Nice. Great. And then the other thing you mentioned also just a second ago is the things that you learned along contributing. That things, obviously in open source projects, things constantly change, right? Like, I just got a comment on another YouTube video on the open source channel where somebody said, could you please try not to have more backwards compatibility in Trivy and not break things when you release, which completely makes sense, right? Like, people, especially in larger organizations, when people use Trivy, it's frustrating when they have to update their integrations and things because the new commands changed and new things don't work anymore, right? But you mentioned specifically that we moved the CLI tool to Cobra, and you had to relearn that, right? You had to consistently look at what's changing, how do you kind of keep up with it and learn those things. Do you have any suggestions for people on how to best deal with that? Because obviously it can be quite overwhelming sometimes, right? When you think you fixed something or you contributed with a new feature or something new, and then things change in the meantime in the project, and you're like, oh my god, I had no idea this was happening, right? What do you do now? Like, it can turn easily into not into a success experience, but into this very frustrating contributor experience of you invested so much time helping out with this, fixing this bug or whatever, and then you weren't aware of roadmap changes, different things happening in a project, and now what you've actually built has to be changed around again to work with the new updates, right? So any thoughts, any suggestions for people who are dealing with these kind of issues to not get frustrated, to maybe navigate that better?
Yeah. So as I said, right, whatever code we write at the end, it's just logic. If you know the logic, it doesn't matter what library, what tech stack it is underneath. So initially, you just build the logic. If you have logic ready, and let's say at the worst case, the entire architecture changes, that would, just allow you to read code better. You would spend more time reading code, you would understand the changes and why they were made. So at the end, changes are done to move forward. And if you see a change, you learn. For example, I think 7 or 8 months ago, to get started in a repository, right, I used to spend a lot of time reading out the merged PRs, because merged PRs, have these really, really small code snippets that change. So you understand, okay, this change was made. These file lengths were changed due to this optimization, due to this. So as the just get more as comfortable as you can with code readability. That helps a lot in the longer run, because if you can understand somebody else's code, you are basically inside their brain, understanding what they want to do.
Totally.
So basically, if you have built a feature, just go ahead with it. Stack, architecture doesn't matter. It's just a minor change.
Definitely. That's great. So you mentioned it earlier, the community aspect to it, how important it is to integrate into an open source community. Was there anybody when you got started with Trivy, was there, how did you integrate yourself with the Trivy community? Was there a point where you felt like you were kind of part of the Trivy community, or do you think like that's still something that we should be working on? Like it can go both ways. Like maybe you had a great experience, right, with some of the maintainers and they were helping you, or maybe there was something where you're like, okay, it would be nice to talk to more people, you know? Like how was that like?
Yeah. So when I found that issue, right, and I have the habit
Yeah.
that when I do it, I just put it up that, hey, can I take this up? And
Mm-hmm.
then, previous contributor, I think, I'm not sure if I have pronounced it. It's called, his name is Kepi or KP.
Tepe, I think.
Tepe, yeah,
he has a really, he has a, the thing is this user handle on GitHub is not telling. So yeah. So
Yeah.
Tepe.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I put up that, hey, can I take this up? And Kepe, instantly replied that, yeah, sure, go ahead. So
Mhm.
after that, right? So one practice that I follow, right, after I would say a couple of learnings is before implementing a feature, right, discuss the
Mhm.
solution approach that you are planning to follow. So, I put up that, okay, you know what, I'm planning to make a change here, add a feature here, do this error handling. Is this a good approach, or, can we make this better? Do you have any ideas? I put this up,
Yeah.
after a couple of days or 3 days of ideation, and then, KP replied to me and said that, hey, you know what, this looks great. Just let's implement this. I quickly
Awesome.
implemented this, open a PR, and that was great. So, yeah, I would say I would, still not consider myself as a part of the Trivy or the Aqua ecosystem because I haven't contributed or, like given back enough, but it's a start. So, yeah.
It's an amazing start. Also, did you find our Slack channel before? Just quick question. Are you
I don't
on
remember when I
Slack?
joined the Slack. I don't remember when I joined it. I'm definitely on it. I think it was
Okay.
pretty much a month or around-ish ago, probably. I think I found it on GitHub
Okay.
only or via the website. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing is it sometimes is a bit hidden, so I was just curious if that's also a place where you like maybe ask questions or look that as well. So yeah, it sounds like you are already a very experienced contributor in that, like having worked in open source and contribute to open source for several years now. What would be one of the tips that you would give somebody getting started right now, or an engineer who wants to start contributing and advancing their skills in open source? Like you shared already so many amazing information, but what were you like one of those things that you might want to tell your younger self of like, I wish I would have done that? Those moments where you're like, oh, this makes sense now, I learned it, but I wish I would have known it sooner. Yeah.
I think I would say two things to pretty much everybody who's watching right now or later. One is the technology stack shouldn't matter. Whatever languages, frameworks that shouldn't, set you back that, hey, I do not know this, let's not do this. And secondly, getting intimidated by the code base. Because
Mhm.
every huge or scaled up project does not have a 2 or 3 file code base. It's pretty huge. It's pretty huge because it is pretty well modulated so that you can refer to it later, or you can easily get access to functions and stuff. So two things:
Yeah.
one, do not step back or hold yourself because of the stack or the languages, and secondly, do
Yeah.
not get intimidated by the size of the code bases or anything. I mean, I think everybody gets intimidated, just that you overcome it at a miniature scale, slowly and steadily.
Yeah, totally. Especially Trivy has, I don't know, 20 different repositories that are feeding into Trivy, right? The Trivy is dependent on it's using under the hood.
Yeah,
And they are like
yeah.
separate repositories, right? But for example, the Trivy operator for Kubernetes, you can just contribute to that if you're really into Kubernetes operators and that functionality, right? And you want to advance it, contribute there. If you're into Terraform, Trivy is using TFSec, which is another project under the hood for Terraform is configuration scanning, right? So understanding, I guess, this breakdown that it's not just Trivy is not just doing everything within Trivy, but it's kind of modular in different components can help people a lot, right? And I think this is also how a lot of other larger projects work, right? Now, we talked a lot about like what things maybe didn't go so well, or where you got stuck and so on. What was like one of the best parts about contributing to Trivy? Besides being on the live stream now, but no, joking.
Okay. The best part would be, right? So before contributing, I was trying to understand the entire architecture, how the code base looks, what all's happening. So what I did, right? I basically understood the entire Trivy repo command. What is
Yeah.
called when, how is the stack, where is the scan happening, how are the understanding if it's an NPM project or let's say cargo project. I dived in, I think, to 10 or 15 files recursively deep. And I just wrote that, okay, this is so basically I have a very naive approach of understanding programs. I just do simple print lns, that's it. I just
Hmm.
find out, okay, where's the main function that executes the app.
Yeah.
I just print one there. What gets coding out, I print two. Something like this. I keep on printing. So when I run the command, right, I get all these logs
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
15793. So I know, okay, 5 was called before 9. So this works
Yeah.
this way, this works this way. So
Yeah.
that usually, like the moment I understood the entire Trivy repo command, right, I was like, you know what, perfect. This is a great
Yeah.
start. I want to do more. So I would say that was the highlight of me taking this issue up, planning to open a PR for this, opening a PR, getting it merged. Yeah.
Awesome. No, it's also great, like feedback and just suggestion for others who are contributing, right? Of like what things that they can do. If you're watching right now the live stream and you have any questions to Shubham or myself or about Aqua, open source, then please comment them in the chat, in the live stream chat, and we will happily answer them here. Also, if you're watching the recording, please comment them below, and we're answering them in the next live streams. Amazing. So I have two more questions. The first one is, or maybe three more questions. So you have like about, if you're watching this, you have like 3 questions kind of time to ask your own questions. So start typing now. But so the first question is, who's helping you in the open source space? Like, are there people that you mentioned earlier that you got started with Git through the help of several friends? There's somebody whom you know in the chat whom you helped to get started with Git. And generally, when you get started with new open source projects, or when you want to discover new open source projects or open source initiatives, like how do you hear about them? Are there people who are helping you? Are there like websites or social media sites where you're keeping an eye out for opportunities, or those kind of things? Like, what are your reference points, basically?
Okay. So the crux being the chapter IEEE VIT that I am a part of, the seniors, being like 2 or 3 years seniors to me, them helping me that, hey, you know what, you're stuck, no
Yep.
issues, we'll help you out. And then my 1 year seniors, that, like directly got me into open source, trained me. And then my friends. So, like I have a friend group of 3, where we go to hackathons together, we build stuff together. So
It's
whenever
great.
we're stuck, right? So 3 of us, right? We expertise in different things. Like
Yeah.
one of us does DevOps, one does backend, one does front end, one does app. So like this helps us learn new things. And because you, like when you do open source, right, you might feel that, okay, I'm the only person doing it. So
Yeah.
you should have that, have some sort of people, or like just a community that you talk to. So
Yeah.
I have these people who help me out. And apart from that, all I could say that the thing that highlights about open source is the community, because at the end all of us are trying to give back, right? Like I was trying to like just make
Yeah.
the tools accessible to everybody. So the community is really, really helpful. For example, I remember before opening my first issue, I connected with Jose on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, I'm taking this issue up, do you have any pointers for me? He's like, Aqua has a great open source requirement, just start with it. If you are stuck anywhere, let me know. Which is really great. And then like a week ago when we had this live stream, I joined in. After that, I pinged him that, hey, you know what, like this session was great, I learned a lot. So after that,
Yeah.
he said that, okay, you know what, whenever you're free for a call, you need help, let me know, I'll be glad to join on a call. So this community, or this friendliness, I'm not sure you will find somewhere else, but it's just how open source work and how great, I would say, my experience at Aqua has been. Like there's just people are very helpful, and like they want you to learn. That's it. You should have a
That,
group of
yeah.
people, or like your community that you talk to, that oh, okay, I'm doing this right now, what are you up to? So yeah.
Totally. This what you just mentioned. This is amazing. I just want to highlight that you are also somebody who takes a lot of initiative, right? From messaging Jose on LinkedIn, asking questions, to create, posting on the issue. Like there are lots of also open source contributors who, see an issue, they put their name on it and they start working on it without, asking for feedback on their initial plan on solving the issue, things like that, right? And it really shows that you're taking initiative, asking for input, and it's kind of this back and forth that you're creating, which makes obviously contributing to open source also less isolating and more like that you integrate it into the project itself as well, which I think is really important to do, and it's a really great skill to develop. And I mean, you reached also out to me on Twitter and asked if you can be on this live stream, you're here, right? So it's as simple as that. A lot of times just reaching out, like, because most of the time people are really just, they want to help you, and if they right now don't have time to help you, then they could refer you to somebody else who does have time, or they might help you later on at a later point when they do have time, right? But somebody not having time is really, or like maybe them being in a bad mood on that day or something, is really the worst that could happen when you reach out to somebody, right? Like in the worst case, I might not reply for like a week or two. That's like the worst that could happen if you reach out to me, right? So things like that as an example, right? No, this is really great. Last question from my side, I think. If there's no question from the community, then like from the people watching right now, then this is probably the last question. But I was just curious, what is next for you in the next like year or two? What are your plans? Like thinking ahead, in terms of open source, in terms of graduation, career-wise, I don't know. What is next for you? What are you planning to do? Is there any like milestone, anything you want to achieve in the next year, or anything you're curious about? It could also be, I don't know, something in your own life, like not related to open source, like anything you want to share with us.
So right now, as I said, right, like I just have one course in the semester, and this ends in 2 months. So after that, like I plan to like actively like look forward to getting involved in companies doing legit stuff in the cloud native or the security space or eBPF space, for example Aqua security, right? So like I just plan to get as much involved as I can, and like that is the plan after 2 months, because in the next 2 months my Google summer of code and my Google season like documentation both would like pretty much be wrapping up. So then like I will be looking for active full-time roles in these like legit cool stuff happening out there.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. This was really, really great. And I was so happy to have you here on the show. Do you have any questions for me? They give you 2 minutes to think about it. If there's somebody who has a question in the chat, now it's really like the last time that you could post in the chat right now. Otherwise, this live stream is available also afterwards. But yeah, like if you have any questions to me, anything related to Trivy, to Aqua, happy to answer. I'm really putting you on the spot right now.
Not really, but what is that one thing that stands out for you in Aqua?
The one thing that stands out to me at Aqua is really how open source is driving the enterprise product. So a lot of times we will test things out or develop things in the open source place first, and then it's translating into the enterprise project. And I think like in the open source team and like in the open source project, there's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of, it's a very dynamic environment. And I think it's really like, I would say like self-contained, healthy environment. Like I feel like even if Aqua wouldn't exist, our open source projects would keep existing. And I think that's really like how you measure, community and like how exciting people think and how important people think a project is, right? That people would still be interested even if the Aqua name wasn't on it, and even if there wouldn't be like a core team maintaining it. I think that's like really what shows that it's there, that it's alive, that it's self-contained, that you're doing something important, right? It's like one of the factors definitely to it. So that really stands out to me. Another thing what you mentioned is also how inclusive and respectful the community is. I think that's very important. So I think that's definitely another thing, especially coming from like a minority background, things like that. It's really important to have that space, right, and to feel welcomed and to feel included and to feel like you have a voice. And I think that's very important. And I think the core team, the core open source team, is doing an amazing job achieving that. Yeah, they have done an amazing job in hiring the core team, open source team, who are driving the project. But yeah, I think those are the main things that stood out to me.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
Yep, that is pretty much it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for your time, for answering all of my questions and giving me feedback on our open source tools. This was really great. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. If there's anybody else who's watching right now who's contributing to our open source projects, to Aqua or related, and you want to be on this show and want me to ask you some questions related to your open source experience, then please do reach out. I'm happy to bring you on as well. Thank you so much again, Shubham, for coming on and your time. This was great. Have an amazing day.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
bringing me up. It was a great moment. Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.